What a year it has been. From the incredible wins to the unforgettable moments, we have covered so much ground together. And in this special year in review episode, we on the Hybrid Ministry Show, we are celebrating you, our amazing community, with highlights and stats and the best of the Hybrid Ministry Show here in 2024. Make sure that you stick around because I've actually distilled a highlight reel of the 2024 Hybrid Ministry Podcast best moments. This just might be your favorite episode yet. Welcome back, everybody, to the Hybrid Ministry Show. I, as always, am your host, Nate Clason, and today we're going to be taking a little bit of a trip down memory lane to celebrate the amazing year and this incredible journey that you and I have been on together. As we always have on this podcast, we're going to be exploring the cutting-edge ministry ideas and equip you with the tools to dominate the digital space in 2025. It's been a ride in 2024, and 2025 is only going to get better, and it is all thank you to you. You know, in 2024, we released a total of 52 audio podcast episodes because we release one every single Thursday. If you haven't liked or subscribed yet, wherever you listen to your podcast, it's free and it will show up in your podcast catcher every single Thursday. Why? Because youth ministry often happens for most youth ministries across the country on Wednesdays. So who doesn't need a little jolt of energy to get them through the rest of their week on Thursdays? But 52 episodes released because we have not missed a single Thursday in the 2.5 or so plus years that we've been doing this podcast. So I just want to share with you some highlights. So the top performing video over this last year was a video that I titled Top 5 Last Minute Game Ideas. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can see some of the clips being overlaid with B-roll. We also, over this year, we've had 9 different playlists that we've worked through, and so in each of those playlists there's obviously a top performing video in each of those playlists. And so our very first playlist we had was the 2024 on-demand masterclass, and in that video the 5 no prep games was a part of the masterclass, and that video had 361 views, and so that was not only the number one video for the year, but obviously the number one in the masterclass playlist. We also dropped a bonus. You might not know this. We dropped a bonus playlist called the Friday Game Day series. It released every Friday on YouTube, and we covered 9 of my favorite DYM games that I use. And so actually, if you head to any of those or link down below in this episode, 9 of my all-time favorite DYM games, I'm giving them away to you completely for free. They are games that are on the website, the Download Youth Ministry website, but I'm giving them away to you in this episode 100% completely for free. And the best performing video in that playlist was the GIFlashback episode. We also went through a playlist titled Some of the Youth Pastors' Biggest Problems, and the number one episode in that was Youth Ministry Planning Weekend Services versus Mid-Week Programming. And actually in that episode we ranked Youth Ministry curriculum. Spoiler, it's co-leader. You should try it. In fact, if you haven't yet, hit the link down below, sidekick.tv/pricing. If you've never signed up for anything with DYM or co-leader, use the code HybridMinistry10, all one word, for get 10% off your first order. We went through the YouTube for Youth Ministry playlist, and the best performing video in that playlist was the flagship title episode, YouTube for Youth Ministry. I then took you through some of the hybrid ministry tools and gear that you needed, and the best episode in that, the highest performing episode, was the best gear for digital ministry in 2024, must-have tech accessories. Then over the summer, we went through an interview series. And that episode, the one that was best in that playlist, was the Solution to Distractions at Youth Group, where I interviewed my good friend Josh Boldman from Download Youth Ministry, Sidekick, and co-leader. Then we went through Meet Generation Alpha, and in that playlist, the Aura and Bark versus Covenant Eyes, an honest youth pastor review, was the highest performing video in that playlist. Finally, I went to my social challenge framework, which was the 4 things that I'm creating content with students and for students, and I can't tell you, I think that might be my most popular playlist to date cumulatively, and just word of mouth and things I've heard from youth pastors on the street. So thank you so much for that feedback. But the best episode in that one was the third one, how churches can use social media, ideas and examples. And finally, the Sidekick, more engaging youth ministry. Again, the best episode in that one was the live Sidekick demo at the date of recording. And again, don't forget code hybrid ministry 10 if you're interested in Sidekick, or link down below for how we are using two computers to run Sidekick and ProPresenter seamlessly to switch between the two. Grab that Black Magic video switcher. It will make your life so much easier. Now listen, on YouTube in total, we had 84,569 views, including our shorts content, with 522 hours of watch time and 151 new subscribers. And in the youth ministry space, that is a fantastic number. And I'm so thrilled with those stats and with those numbers, simply because here I am in my guest bedroom late at night recording a podcast into the back of my cell phone. And I have a real job, and I'm just doing this on the side with my own sort of like equipment at home. And so thank you so much for your support. You might also not know this, but we have an audio-only podcast. It drops anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we've had almost 5,000 downloads. Our biggest month was by far August, with almost nearly 1,000 downloads in that month alone. And the number one downloaded audio podcast was my interview with my brother himself. The YouTube video is linked down below in the show notes, but it's my interview with my brother Nate Clason. We talked about social media and how he's doing it in his context and in his youth ministry. So shout out to all of you. Again, thank you for an amazing year. Thank you for cruising through those stats with me. But what I wanted to do now is I wanted to share some of the best comments that we've gotten so far this year and so far to date. So from Jesse Johnson, first of all, he disagreed with my take on coffee and saying that Dunkin' was terrible, which I'll give him that. It's not great. It's a chain. But if I have to choose between that and Starbucks, that's what I'm stuck with. That's what I'm going to choose. But he said this. He said, using polls in the welcome loop in Sidekick is so easy. Can't believe I didn't think of it. Excited to try that one out. Claire said this in our Best Parenting App podcast. We use Bark, and it has been so wonderful for our family. We have an 11-year-old, and it has been a lifesaver. We can monitor everything that she does online, block her from seeing certain websites, track her locations, etc. Recently, she disabled the app because her and my husband, we both get notifications, so we went to our daughter. Immediately, turns out she had disabled it because she wanted to watch South Park and Family Guy, as well as some other PG-13 movies. She said, nope. Luckily, my husband and I got there before she could see anything inappropriate. We're grateful for Bark for protecting our little girl from online dangers and protecting her from innocence and inappropriate content. We love Bark. Paul Turner said this about our why your youth ministry follow-up isn't working. He said, this is great stuff. Lots of idea. I went and bought it, talking about the box that I sold. I'll be sharing this with my newsletter. If you ever want to collab, let me know. Keep up the great work. And finally, a frequent guest here on this podcast. Over a year ago, we did a Christmas episode together. He was also on one of my interview series over the summer, Eric with the K. Williams. He said, this is great. Anyone starting out needs to watch this. And he's talking about my church social media from scratch episode in the hybrid ministry tools. Man, what an amazing year. But if I'm looking back and if I'm taking on some of my reflections and kind of key moments, I would have to say it's two individuals, a guy by the name of Tim Kelly and Kendall Yeaton, both, by the way, who happen to live in the state of Indiana. I don't think that they collabed on this, but both of them at two different times. Tim actually reached out to me for some custom coaching this year, and that was a super fun and super just honestly rewarding process to walk through, and it showed me the value of custom coaching, because what I would have recommended to you in my guest bedroom into the back of my cell phone camera was a little bit different once I started talking to Tim, which is why I believe custom coaching is valuable for anyone who's interested in it. Link down below if you want to inquire about what that looks like. It is a very modest and a very cheap price for custom coaching. Or if you don't want like the one-on-one Zoom type interaction, consider joining our Patreon page. That's $1 per week for a bonus episode, $4 per month, and I'll just share stream of consciousness ideas, and you might not need the actual like coaching, do this, but you'll get to glean ideas. And then I was at the DYM 100 conference a month ago or so, and Kendall walked up to me and he said, man, thank you so much much for your podcast. It's really helpful. It's really beneficial. I shared your playlist, your ideas with some of our social media people, and it's incredibly, incredibly helpful. And so it's just really rewarding for me to be able to do this and just put this content out into the world, out into the ether, and get feedback from real live human beings and real live people who have come to me in different instances, in different cases. Tim, all virtually, Kendall in person, just saying, man, thank you for what you're doing. It really is helpful to me to hear that. And so if you have feedback or anything like that, I would obviously and always welcome that. Lines and channels of communication are completely open. Here on this podcast, we have a couple really cool benchmarks. Just the month of December, we launched a Patreon page, are selling a couple of products over there, as well as that monthly podcast that I was talking about. And so that's a pretty fun kind of benchmark, kind of new thing for us, a new endeavor. We'd love to have you check that out if that's something that you're interested in. And then also, back in August, I got the opportunity to start posting these podcasts to the Download Youth Ministry blog. So if you're interested in that, you can go to blog.downloadyouthministry.com to check that out. And the link down below introduces my very first post on there. Actually, Josh Boldman, he introduced me, and then I now am an author there on the DYM blog. So that's something that's really, really exciting. But speaking of Josh Boldman, as well as many of our other guests, I would like to thank my different guests that I had on this year. So Josh Boldman, of course, from Download Youth Ministry. We actually had him on twice. We talked once about Sidekick and solutions to distractions in youth ministry and harnessing Sidekick and utilizing and using cell phones to not be a distraction, but instead to be something that you can use to help promote creativity and involvement and engagement. But then one episode was my all-time, maybe my favorite episode this entire year, was where him and I sat down and he brought a mock service order sheet that he put on. And then he said, hey, how can you hybridize this? How can you make this accessible to the people sitting online, streaming at home? Man, both of those episodes, go check either one of them out. But that was one of my all-time favorite episodes. I had Eric with a K on, where we talked about better event promotion. And that was actually a collaborative episode. So the first part of that interview was on his channel, Practical Youth Ministry Tips. And the second part was over here on my channel. And so if you only listened to on my channel, you only heard really half of that conversation. Of course, I mentioned earlier my brother. We had David Carpenter, youth pastor from Kentucky. My former resident, Caleb Flywheel Maeda, and a Gen Zer's take on what we've been doing in youth ministry and student ministry. He worked with and for me for an entire year in this sort of hybrid infrastructure. And so if you want to hear an honest take, hear from him. And then we had a really special episode dropped this year, our 100th episode. And so for our 100th episode, I went all the way back to the beginning, even before this podcast started. And I talked about when I started at a church in COVID. And so I interviewed my current boss now and my boss then, Darren Sutton, his son, who is our video editor for much of what we did for our digital online presence for a show that we created on YouTube called Unscripted. So his son Isaac was on the show. And then I also interviewed Sam Voss, good friend of mine and host of the Unscripted show and podcast. Super fun time. But hey, listen, this year, I'm wondering if, as I'm recapping and recounting 2024, if as you got your eyes set on 2025, what are you doing to have a more hybrid, more digital, more creative youth ministry? Because as my friend and boss Darren says, digital is no longer a luxury. It is now a necessity. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish, again, over on our Patreon page. If that's something that you're interested in, where I will talk about what we're doing on a week-to-week basis in our youth ministry over on Patreon, I would love to have you just come check out, listen in on what we're doing, and hopefully maybe just that $4 a month is an investment enough to help kickstart and spur on your own creativity. We'd love to have you join us over there. It's a super fun community. There's all sorts of perks as well. But hey, thank you so much for sticking around for this entire episode. And as promised at the very top, right here, we have an amazing recap overlay. I went back through every single episode and I pulled out some of my favorite snippets and clips from the last year. So enjoy this. And as always, my friends, don't forget to stay hybrid. Okay, so there are like 3 kind of core tenets, philosophical things that you actually need to understand when it comes to time management. These aren't tips, these aren't tactics. These are things that you have to understand first, and these have to inform the tips and the tactics. No amount of tips, no amount of tactics will be helpful to you if you don't understand these things. So core tenet number 1 is that you are 100% responsible for your time. The reason this matters is because this is the difference between is that kid in kids ministry or is that kid in youth ministry. And if we're talking about youth group numbers and youth group attendance, we need to understand Gen Alpha, but we also need to understand Gen Z. The kicker on this is that Gen Z, really the youngest Gen Z that we have is going to be freshmen, sophomores in high school, and now after that they're waving on up. They're in college already and they are entering the workforce. What should you be doing? Well, number 1, start posting long form to YouTube. Get a DYM membership. It's gonna look very different in 2024 and frankly beyond because of Generation Z and now Generation Alpha both waving up, Z into the adult ministry conversation, Alpha into the youth ministry conversation. It makes me wonder if the future is already here. I think it might be. Megan and all her friends, and she brought a lot of her friends to youth group, so this like kind of mattered because like she could bring 2, 3, or 4 different friends with her to youth group. They had show choir and it met every single Wednesday night, and so that made Wednesday nights a really tricky night to do youth ministry. But Brandon, the only other boy in the youth ministry, had Tuesday night and Thursday night karate. And then of course Friday nights are like the football game. Like for most towns USA, that's when the high school team is playing its football game. So that really only left us with Monday night as an option, which but the pro of Wednesday night to me is probably your most traditional youth night. It's been what a lot of churches and a lot of youth groups have done for years. And like down here where I live in DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area, a lot of churches do Wednesday night. And I came from Chicago. Not many churches did Wednesday night, and that's just kind of a cultural thing, right? But the pro to me is it's like a midweek kind of jolt of energy. Well, hey everyone, welcome to Friday Game Day. In this episode, link down below, 100% completely for free, I have for you Back to School Bingo. And if you're like, I don't need Back to School Bingo, it's not back to school yet, well then head on over to downloadyouthministry.com and you can grab my end of the school year bingo. Well, that idea of course is go hybrid. And listen, I'm not saying to completely abandon your in-person meetings. In fact, that would go completely against the hybrid strategy, because hybrid is melding together of your digital presence and your in-person presence and making it one in the same. But linked right here on the screen and down in the description or wherever you're getting this, or hybridministry.xyz/089 is my 100% completely free strategy guide. It is my ebook on how I build out a full-fledged digital strategy. It's mostly focusing on a done-for-you social media strategy, but it's anchored by the long-form teaching video, which takes place and is posted weekly every time we teach, pre-filmed messages on YouTube direct to camera. Pro number 1, of course, is like developmentally splitting middle school and high school seems to be appropriate. In my over a year journey on this podcast, I have grown to love YouTube. When I started with social media and when I started trying to reach students on the internet, YouTube was a distant, kind of far strategy that was on my radar. Like it was like, I'll post some videos over there. But in my time since that, which was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I have come to love YouTube, and I am more and more convinced that YouTube, in addition to all other digital and social mediums that we can effectively reach students with, but YouTube is one of the best resources out there. You can always say down below in the description are links. And so for every single video that I post on my Student Ministries YouTube channel, we post 2 links. The first link is a Next Steps digital type connect card. Now think about your own viewing habits on social media. When you're on there, you're not necessarily on there to just be informed, right? Like link down below is a complete blog of every single piece of gear that I have built in this studio.
All of the students in the room who were watching Unscripted had bingo cards that coordinated to stuff that would
yes!
Digital integration is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
It was I probably felt God's hand more in like my career, my life in that moment than a lot of other moments.
Unscripted played a really major role in like the catalyst to especially my podcast and everything like that. I would say the reason for that is simply realizing and understanding that students live online.
There's a lot I've messed up in my years of youth ministry, but that is one thing that I'm really proud of. Like in the middle of the pandemic, there was not a blink. Ministry kept going.
We're going to try something different.
And you should use your cell phone to your advantage.
I think the things that have been working the most has been getting students involved on the page. Not even in terms of like on the page traction as much as like in-person traction almost.
Speak to our students on Wednesday nights for about 18 to 22 minutes. Sunday morning is 28 to 32 minutes. And we think they probably remember everything we said, right? Like they wrote the notes, they've got it, and they've already applied every one of these points. It was alliterated, and remember my great illustration? And when we're including things that are reflecting on the teachings, I think that reinforces and reminds those who were in the room.
I think seeing you like super passionate about it and watching your podcast really honestly, like and your different videos and clips on like TikTok and stuff.
To sign in, like every single time you had to type in the password.
That was a great feature.
I got into trouble one time. I was in front of our whole camp, like it was like 1,000 kids, right? And Sidekick was running, and then it crashed, and then they had to reopen it, and they're like, from the booth, they yell out, "What's the password?"
No.
And in front of 1,000 students, I had to say a password into the microphone. And here's the best part. You ready for this? It was the same password for everything, like my bank account and all this stuff. So like, we need to not be afraid of what our students want, and we need to not be afraid of them expressing their opinion, and we need to not be afraid of them disagreeing with each other or with us.
Better event promotion, as well as a holistic digital and social media approach for your church and your youth ministry. And this is actually part 2. Part 1 is linked right here at the top of the screen over on another channel, because we're doing a massive mashup collab, and I am joined today by my friend Eric with a K petition, because in just a minute we're going to look at the Bark versus Aura page. But Aura has parental controls, and they are now in partnership with Circle. You might remember Circle by Disney. The first video idea that we do, it's called Drafts. Actual challenge idea number 2 that we do in our church and in our student ministry is a game called...
Name of the game is 7 questions.
Man on the Street. Now, I use transition style videos where it starts with the video of something else, and the most popular one I can think about is like a bull ramming a guy during the running of the bulls, and then all these people cutting right there to jumping into the back of some chairs and jump. Millennial churchgoers said this. They said hybrid church, just as much as physical church, will be a, get this, good fit for them. One of the things about 5-minute countdowns that I actually hate, and I know that as talking to a guy who works for Download Youth Ministry, and that's where a lot of the money is made and a lot of 5-minute countdowns are sold, I actually prefer, which by the way, talking to you right now, let this be an unofficial Sidekick feature request. Because right now in Sidekick you can loop your announcements, right? You can loop some like graphic slides, and I actually prefer that to be the 5-minute countdown with just the 5-minute countdown overlaid in the corner, so that all of the announcements that you're announcing and trying to let your students know about are happening is being seen on the screen. And then the very last piece of it, my favorite piece of it, the piece that I think makes it hybrid, is right when you open the box, you'll see this QR code here, and it just says, welcome video, scan me. And so we'll have students who are new, they'll open this up theoretically on their porch, on their patio, wherever. They will scan it, and then we'll take them to a video right here. Really launching here during the course of this playlist, starting officially on December 2nd, a brand new bonus podcast. I'm going to be releasing it one time per week. Going to be over on my Patreon page. But a student, give them an opportunity to be a part of this. Give them a seat at the table to let them know that this church is about the next generation and that it matters. Again, it's no longer the day where we can just hand this off to an unpaid intern, hope that they keep our social media on life support. Like, get after it, my friends. 2025 is going to be your year. We are here in the Hybrid Ministry Show to help it out. Subscribe wherever you're on podcasts, leave a rating, a review, like the video, however you can get the word out. We want to help you crush social here in 2025. I'm so excited to do it along with you. Thanks for being here. And don't forget, my friends, as always, to stay hybrid.